where to pursue financing in a time in a market like this?
I was going to say, I think well, it's interesting you mentioned hearing aids, because one of our earliest investments was a...
It's the same, it's David Green.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I think we've probably worked with the same person. What we learned from...
He funds him too.
Yeah.
And David Green is excellent, by the way. So how can people find out about David Green if they're interested in the room?
I think that's one question. Is there a way for people...
Him with hearing aids.
Yeah.
What's the website?
You can contact the Jewish Community Foundation in Oakland. They have the contact information.
I think as far as the space goes, we are one of the organizations. The Skoll Foundation is another. There's a number of organizations kind of in the space. What we've actually learned a little bit, and it's a little bit of the question of learn what you're good at and learn what you're not good at. We no longer bet on technologies because we've discovered we're not nearly smart enough to figure out if something's going to work and if it's going to sell. So we will essentially only fund something that has proven revenue models, feet on the ground, going concern business. Again, because finding businesses that work to serve the poor in these environments is already hard enough. So we don't want to take guesses. But I do think, Skoll and similar networks. There's a network called the Aspen Network for Development Entrepreneurs, which has brought together a number of organizations in our sector. So it may be that through that also. And also the Rockefeller Foundation has something called the Global Impact Investing, and I can't remember what network, I guess, might help as well.
Hi, Ruth Messenger, American Jewish World Service. I know some of the work of some of the panelists, and I thank you for that presentation. But what I guess I'd like you to talk about is sort of after the innovation what? Because part of what's happening with this discussion about innovation is people want to do the next innovative thing. But it takes a while for something new to really take hold and make change. And so we don't want, or I don't want to see, and we at American Jewish World Service do a lot of funding in the developing world. We look all the time for innovators, but then we make a commitment to stay with them for a very long time, assuming they're not failing, the way Cheryl spoke about, assuming they're succeeding. It takes lots and lots of time to figure out what works, to figure out what next stage development is. And so I get nervous when people talk about funding innovation, because it's like, what's next year's new trick? And then you leave them in the lurch. So I'd just like some comments on that.
Well, I'll just say one sentence, which is, our average investment horizon is 5 to 7 years, so I couldn't agree with you more.
You know Hildy Simmons, who was the head of J. Chase Foundation? I don't know if people must know her. She's really, I think, one of the great philanthropists around. And if you ask her, she is very, doesn't feel that there's the social entrepreneur funding and the traditional funding, and there's that you find qualified people who have an idea that's sound. You find organizations that have been around for 100 years and are doing great things where these categories are just not really helpful. And I think we need to, go back to the core of this, which is solving a problem, and where is that happening? And I hope that as we mature in the discussion, we start realizing that. And I think many people, not even just start, I think a lot of people have been realizing this a long time.
I also think that the most satisfying investments of time, money, other resources in innovation are in managers or teams that innovate regularly. And it's not just that one breakthrough innovation, as you're calling it, but really people who adapt and modify and can play well with others and do all the things that you hope people will do to make more efficient, to make things cheaper, faster, or quicker. Cheaper, faster, or better.
And also wearing my family foundation hat, we tend to have fewer, deeper, much long-standing relationships. And in fact, we don't see an end to our relationships as long as we believe that our vision is still aligned, our values are still aligned, and our strategies are aligned. I'm not saying that means the nonprofit is doing what we say. It means that we are in constant dialogue to understand the direction of the organization and our direction. And if that's the case, we see a long horizon and, in perpetuity, who knows? Who has the mic? Okay. So we had a gentleman over here who had, nope, he passes. Okay, back there. Or whoever gets the mic first, I guess, at this point.
I had a question about public-private partnerships, particularly for Sarah. Your world is really changing, and as the Obama administration is claiming that they're going to fill this health insurance gap, for example, you now have started an insurance fund. So are you betting that they're going to fail and that your people are still going to need health insurance?
And what are you, from ABC News over here?
No. I mean, how do you make these decisions about whether you want to push the government to solve the problem or whether you yourself want to build a solution to the problem? And I know others are working in public-private partnerships. What's the decision-making process for that?
Yeah. No, I think that's a really great point. I will say one thing that's not going to be an answer first, if that's okay. But one thing that I think is interesting about having an orientation that you build something first. So for us, we started providing health insurance, over 10 years ago in any which way we could, because that was the #1 issue for our members. And it meant, let me just say, I'm a labor lawyer, I'm an employment lawyer, I was a union organizer, a public defender, and the last thing on earth I cared about was health insurance. And it just happened to be the thing. And so it's a discipline that you have to start understanding. And the way I started learning was to talk to brokers. It was very not romantic. It's how does insurance work, and what are the issues, and how is it grouped, and how do you define it? So why am I telling you this? Well, it's very interesting that when you have to learn something from an industry perspective and you're a do-gooder, it gives you a way to talk and watch how the insurance industry writ large is working. And one of the things that often worries me is that a lot of the people who are in health policy, who are like on the do-gooder side, don't understand the insurance industry at all. And so sometimes I think that's one of the difficult things about where we are at right now, because there are two very different camps. And so the question I believe you're asking me is, where do you draw the line at modeling a social program or problem, and then what happens if the government steps in and can replace you? I think the question, or the answer really is, if the government can step in and do something and it makes it that you're not doing anything worthwhile, then of course the answer is obvious. I think I have a different take, which is that I don't believe that the best system, and this is just my political worldview, is that we want one where the individual is related to the government, like as in I get all my benefits from the government, nor do I want the individual to go just to the private sector. I think that the employer played an important intermediary grouping role, but we're at a time where we need new groups. And the groups have to be unions, nonprofit, community groups, faith-based groups, that they can start providing them, because that's very de Tocquevillian or very Jewish or whatever, but it's a way that we recognize that it's solidarity, it's sadika, it's the way people feel a connection to other people because they're economically connected to one another. So the short answer is, I think what the Obama administration is doing is really exciting. I think the first year is really about figuring out the first steps. I think that when they're going to start getting to a lot of innovation on a lot of policy is going to be later. And I don't think that for us it's sort of how do we build on what they do. Sorry for that long answer.
I think that's absolutely right. I think the Obama administration will do a fabulous job. I think that is a case where talent has found talent. I hope that's a case where talent found unlike talent. But I think that's the real concern about the itemized deduction reduction, is that it's wonderful to create a pot of money for the uninsured, but when you reduce the opportunities for individuals to contribute to new models of service delivery that are perhaps more efficient or more longer term than the government sees as its term, or innovative, you run into a problem. I think that's really what distinguishes the United States tax system and its answers to creative solutions to a lot of things like poverty that doesn't exist in most European countries.